Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. So thankful to have you joining us today. The subject on today's show is abortion. Now, before you grab the remote and turn me off, listen to me for just a minute. Today, there are many issues in the news that fight for our attention. With the war in Iran, the economy, the Epstein files, immigration. But there is no other issue that is more important than the mass killing of innocent children that is going on around the world in silence, which we call abortion. So you may think, well, I'm pro-life and I've heard it all. Please don't tune out. Abortion is the leading cause of death worldwide. At over 70 million people per year, innocent people slaughtered in the womb. In the United States of America, the number is almost 1 million per year, and that's just the abortions that we know of. With the onslaught of the abortion pill, there are countless abortions going on that are never reported, that we know nothing about. Think about it. 1 million babies murdered every year in America. Yet the politicians and the news media hardly ever talk about it anymore. I bring it up here on Truth and Liberty, not because I think it's going to make my ratings go up, right? I bring it up because of the magnitude of the atrocity. It's going on every day, in every city, in every county, in every state around the Union. There are 2 babies murdered every minute in America. Since this show began, 3 babies have died. Brothers and sisters, we need to face this reality. The Church of Jesus Christ must rise up once again and begin to declare the moral imperative that abortion be banned. We must rise up again and call the nation to listen to its conscience and to protect the innocent. For us to ignore abortion is itself a crime. As Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Who was Dietrich Bonhoeffer? He was a Christian pastor in Nazi Germany. He worked to raise an awareness about Nazi atrocities, about tyranny, about the injustice of Hitler and his regime, and to build resistance against it in the country. Eventually, his faithfulness to righteousness and truth cost him his life as he was arrested and put to death. You know, the Nazis, we talk a lot about them in culture, and we love to say, oh, he's a Nazi, although, well, I don't love to do it, but I mean the left does. The Nazis killed 6 million innocent Jews. How many babies have we killed in America? Since Roe versus Wade, 70 million, right? How many people today claim that abortion is okay because, the baby's not really a human being? I want to say to that today, church, we need to be equipped to resist this lie. God's word disagrees. God fashioned us in the womb and knew us not only there, but even before we were born. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5 says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." Now, how is God going to know someone? How is he going to sanctify someone who's not even a person, who's just a blob of tissue? Galatians chapter 1 verse 15, the Apostle Paul said, "When it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace." Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16. The Bible says, "For thou hast possessed my reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth." This lowest parts of the earth is a metaphor. and the secret place, a metaphor for the formation of a child in his mother's wombs. And he says then in verse 16, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. God makes us in the womb. We are living human beings from the moment of conception forward. In Luke chapter 1, verse 41, and in verse 44, it tells the story of when Mary visited Elizabeth, her cousin, who was pregnant with John the Baptist. And the Bible tells us that John the Baptist, in the womb, leapt for joy at the voice of Mary, the mother of Jesus. How is it that a baby in the womb could have joy and leap because of that joy, much less hear the voice of another human being if he's not a person, if he's not a human being? In the law of Moses, if someone hurts a pregnant woman and she loses her baby, that person was to be put to death, just like someone who murdered another human being. Look at Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 and 23. Now, if people struggle with each other and strike a pregnant woman so that she gives birth prematurely, but there is no injury, the guilty person shall certainly be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, you shall appoint as a penalty, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, and wound for wound, bruise for bruise. God condemns abortion. God condemns the killing of innocent life throughout the Bible. And in Ezekiel chapter 16, before I go there, let me say this. There was a practice in ancient times in the Middle East. It was the worship of a false god called Molech. And in the worship of the false god Molech, people would take their infant children or their toddlers or whatever age, and they would have this false god Molech who had these bronze arms like this, and they would start this raging inferno and heat Molech to a degree that he was so hot it would burn and incinerate anything it touched, and then they would take their child and lay it in Molech's arms and kill it. God condemned child sacrifice to Molech in the Bible over and over again. Let me give you an example. Ezekiel 16, 20 to 21. Moreover, thou hast taken thy sons and daughters, whom thou hast borne unto me, and these thou hast sacrificed unto them to be devoured. In this of thy whoredoms, a small matter, thou hast slain my children and delivered them to cause them to pass through the fire for them. God is saying, you're sacrificing my children when you slaughter them like this. Since Roe versus Wade in America, back to America for a minute, since Roe versus Wade was overturned, abortion in our country has actually gotten worse. It's gotten better in some states, worse in others, where states now have the power to restrict and outlaw abortion. Some states are doing so, and some states actually are opening the doors wider than ever, saying, come here and have your abortion. However, but the reason it's expanded primarily is because of the abortion pill. Now, the abortion pill is actually two pills, but what they are is they're synthetic hormones that cause the woman's body to go into labor and expel the living child within her. These pills, it is illegal under federal law since 1876 or 86, something like that, to ship these through the mail. But under the Biden administration, America began the practice of ignoring that law and not enforcing it. And then the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, revised its regulations to say, well, the abortion pill doesn't have to be administered in the presence of a doctor anymore. Women can take it on their own, over the counter, if you will. It's not strictly over the counter. They have to have a prescription, but they don't have to be in the doctor's office. So in the age of telehealth, you call up, beep, beep, beep. Yeah, I'm pregnant. I want to have an abortion. Can I get the pill? Sure, ma'am. Send me a picture of your pregnancy test. Boop. Okay, yep, here's your prescription. Boom, done. You get the pill, you take it. A day later, 2 days later, the baby is dead and flushed down the toilet. Not to mention the woman in the process has murdered her own child and will suffer. She suffers not only the experience, the pain, the blood loss, the risk to her own life in having an abortion outside the presence of a doctor. And don't believe the lies that the pill is safe. It's not. I'll talk about that more in a second if I have time. But women are suffering the psychological, mental, emotional, and spiritual trauma of murdering their children under the lie that it's nothing but a lump of tissue. And they're seeing their babies being deposited in the toilet. And then they see it and they recognize, oh my goodness, what have I done? Today, we have 6 judges on the Supreme Court who believe that the original intent of the United States Constitution should be applied. The Constitution says that government cannot deprive any person of life without due process of law. This is in the Bill of Rights in the 5th Amendment. Under the law at the time of the adoption of the Constitution, abortion was a crime. It was illegal for a woman to kill her unborn child, even back then. And you're like, wait, they had the technology? Sure they did. They could ingest poisons of different kinds. They could brutalize the woman. They could use other means to extract that child. In the time of the founding of America, the adoption of the Constitution, it was universally the law and universally understood that to do such a thing would be to deprive the child of his God-given right to life. So today, when we look back, when we look at the Constitution of America and we ask ourselves, is it constitutional for a state or the federal government to pass a law protecting the murder of innocent life in the womb? A reasonable, rational person who looks at the evidence, at the legal history, and at the law and at the evidence can come away with no other conclusion but that, no, the Constitution protects the life of the unborn child, and states may not pass laws that contravene that protection. And guys, our guest today is Allan Parker. He's here to talk about the right to life in the U.S. Constitution and more. Allan has devoted much of his life to fighting for the unborn. He's an accomplished attorney, received his JD with high honors from the University of Texas School of Law in 1979. He was an associate editor of the Texas Law Review and honored to be selected for Chancellor, Order of the Coif, and many other honors. He served as a law professor, and he graduated Phi Beta Kappa from University of Oklahoma with a degree in economics in 1974. And this legal scholar is here to talk about this fundamental question of the right to life in the Constitution today. Mr. Parker founded an organization called the Justice Foundation and several other organizations that are part of that to educate the public and to encourage us and motivate us to fight in our courts to end abortion. So I'm very honored to have him on our show today, and I believe that you're going to find his presentation and our discussion today to be actually extremely informative and actually riveting at times. So we're going to share some information with you on a little break here in just a second. Please don't go away. Stay tuned for this amazing interview of Allan Parker, an accomplished attorney and the founder of the Justice Foundation. Let me give away one little hint too. Allan Parker is actually represented before her death Norma McCorvey, who Norma was the Roe in Roe versus Wade. Norma McCorvey got saved and had a change of heart as she realized that she was a part of changing the law in a way that facilitated the murder of 50 to 60 million children at the time. And she filed suit to try to get it overturned, and Allan represented her. So we have a star on our show today. You won't want to miss this. Guys, if you're not a subscriber to Truth and Liberty, can I encourage you please to become one? You won't regret it, I promise you. If you go to our website at truthandliberty.net and you click the subscribe button and you share your email with us, I'm going to send you a free copy of my booklet called The Calling to Manhood. Every man made by God has a divine calling upon him. And we're not women. Women aren't men. We have a unique calling. And I believe that there are three aspects to it, to our calling, that every man needs to understand and celebrate in his own life. And the women who love men need to celebrate and recognize these callings as well. So get the booklet today and learn all about it. All right, guys, we'll be right back in just a minute or two with this amazing interview of Allan Parker.
Darkness has attacked our nation, but God is raising a standard. Now is the time to wake up and shine the light across America and around the world. Believers are fighting back, eyes are opening, hearts are changing, and Christ is being proclaimed. In government, education, family, media, and the church, we are mobilizing to engage culture with truth. Go to truthandliberty.net.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Truth and Liberty. And as I said, my very special guest today is fellow barrister Allan Parker. And Allan is the founder and president, and I suppose CEO and chief poobah of the Justice Foundation, one of the kind of quiet firms out there in America that is fighting in the courts for our freedom and for the right to life above all else. And Allan, thank you for joining our show. We're deeply honored to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be on the program with you. And thank you all for all you do.
Allan, one of the things that people may not realize is that you actually had the privilege of representing Norma McCorvey, who was the Roe in Roe versus Wade. Now, you didn't represent her in that case because she was being used by the abortion industry to lobby the Supreme Court for the infamous ruling about abortion, but you represented her later as she had become a Christian and wanted to challenge that ruling. And can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yes, it was very amazing, unusual journey. We got the call in the year 2000, about 5 years after she'd publicly been baptized in a swimming pool in Dallas, Texas on ABC News. So she was a Christian. She had become more and more pro-life as she grew in reading the Bible, and felt very, very, very badly about being responsible for 1 million deaths of babies every year. But we got the call to represent her in 2000. And in her efforts to reverse Roe v. Wade, we were asked if we would represent her in a friend of the court case on behalf of a little 16-year-old girl named Donna Santa Marie, who'd been forced to have an abortion. And I went to my first March for Life, and on the way back, I met Norma at that. And on the way back, when I was in the Dallas airport, it hit me that Norma and Sandra could file a Rule 60 motion to set aside their own cases. Very unusual, but it can be done. You have to have new evidence. You have to have a very just reason. And I was also sort of felt the Lord was telling me to collect the women's testimonies about how abortion impacted them. The pro-life movement had been saying, this is a human being. This is a life. We can't take the life of an innocent human. And that's true. And it should have been enough, but it wasn't. And you can prove that by science. But how do you prove that abortion hurts women? I feel the best testimony is the women's own words. And I felt no woman could really kill her child without it, in fact, impacting her deeply. So I began to pray for about 30 days. And the Lord gave me a scripture. I was saying, Lord, nobody can break through the stronghold of abortion. I said, Lord, do you really want us to do this? Nobody can break through. And on about the 30th day, Sandra Cano called us. She was the Doe of Doe v. Bolton, the companion case to Roe v. Wade. And she asked us to represent her.
Wow.
And hers was a story of forced abortion. She said, Mr. Parker, that case has been a doom on my shoulders since the beginning. I never wanted an abortion. The affidavit about me is a lie.
Oh, wow.
So that night, my wife came home from the homeschool library with a little book called The Bed's Too Short and Other Spiritual Essays. And it said, if you get this book, then ministry's going to expand, and you better go with God or you'll be too cramped. Well, I thought, okay, but next morning I checked the context of Scripture, kind of being a cautious lawyer. And this is what it said. This is what got me going and kept me going for 30 years. And I believe it's still true today that God's going to end abortion completely in America. But here's what he said. Thus says it starts Isaiah 28, verses 14 to 22. Thus says the Lord to the mocking judges who rule my people in Jerusalem. So this is God talking to the judges or rulers in Jerusalem, the capital city. Here's what he said to those judges, and I think it applied to our court. Behold, you've made a covenant with death. You've made an agreement with the grave. You don't think the overwhelming scourge will reach you because you've covered yourself with fraud and deception.
Wow.
Wow, that was my reaction. I got goosebumps. She had just told me the story of fraud and deception in the courtroom, in the court itself. And of course, Rose, a fraud that it's not a baby and it's good for women, all sorts of fraud. Then God says, behold, I'm laying a cornerstone, a sure foundation. He who believes will not be disturbed in a hurry. And I'm afraid I got in a hurry sometimes. But then he said, I will make justice the measuring line, which was the measure in Rule 60 that we were going to use. If it's no longer just, the court can set it aside. He said, I will make justice the measuring line, righteousness the plumb line. Hail will sweep away the refuge of lies. Waters will overflow the secret place, and your covenant with death will be annulled. The agreement with the grave will not. And that, I just, again, I was almost weeping. I mean, it was just so amazing because hail, each woman's testimony is a hailstone, but you have to have a hailstorm to destroy a building. And waters overflowing the secret place were the tears of women as they fill out these declarations. I've never known a woman yet who said she didn't fill it out without crying about it. So we knew that. And then the last thing I'll say, just kind of move on from that, I've been saying no one can break through the brick wall. It's the biggest wall in the law. We call it the abortion distortion. And I said, nobody can break through. In about verse 18 or 21 says, for I, the Lord, will rise up as at Mount Perazim. I'll be stirred up as in the valley of Gibeon to do my amazing, extraordinary, unusual work. And that's the last quote from God. And then the prophet says to me, it's in all of us reading, he says, now don't you be a scoffer or your chains will become stronger. But listen to that. He said, Baal Perazim, and that means the Lord, the master of breakthroughs. I never heard that term before, but it's a name of God and was explained in a footnote. So I said, okay, God, I'm in. And then it's just an amazing story of God's transformation, the miracles, the amazing, extraordinary things. Think what it took. The election of a playboy from New York to get 3 judges confirmed on the court. The death of Scalia just before the election, which I believe helped focus the attention of America on the court and contributed to Donald Trump's election because he said, I will appoint judges. I'll appoint 2 to 3 judges who will reverse Roe v. Wade. No other Republican candidate would have had the courage to say that. It was not the establishment line, which was I'll appoint strict constructionists. Yeah. So I write about all that in my book, more and more stories, the prayer, the God, it's a providential history of the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
So Allan, wow, that's a phenomenal story and really incredible. Your book, sir, is called Reversing Roe versus Wade, My Journey with Roe, Doe, and God. And where can people get a copy of that?
Well, right on our website at the Justice Foundation. That's the best place to buy it. You can buy it anywhere books are sold. Reversing Roe v. Wade by Allan Parker, if you want to Google. But the best places go to thejusticefoundation.org. And there's a lot of free resources there, or you can buy the book there.
Well, I want to make sure that we get this in. So I want to ask you today, as an experienced attorney, spent decades in the pro-life movement. You're a former law professor, an author. Is the right to life in the U.S. Constitution?
And it's been hidden from us, but the answer is yes. It's in the Constitution. It's in there twice. It's in writing. It's so explicit that once you start putting it up, no one can deny it. Only a fool. And there's 2 life clauses in the Constitution.
Well, sir, you've got a presentation with some slides, and I just want to give you the freedom on Truth and Liberty today to actually walk our viewers through this presentation to talk about, is the right to life in the Constitution, and what's the scriptural basis for this provision?
Well, thank you very much. And I'm happy for that, because everyone that watches this show will know where the 2 life clauses are. They're easy to take in your heart. They'll see that the Declaration of Independence has become important again in the legal interpretation of the Constitution. We'll quote it, and this is the 250th anniversary, and our president is calling for our nation to rededicate itself to God, to being one nation under God. This is an amazing historic times, people are. They can get this PowerPoint themselves. So is there a right to life in the existing Constitution? Most people say something like, well, I hope so, maybe. Or if they get around to quoting something, then they'll quote the Declaration of Independence. They'll say, self-evident truths, right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Well, that's good. It means that there is one. But where is the right to life in the Constitution? And the answer is, it's in the 5th and the 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The 5th Amendment says, no person shall be deprived of what? Life, without due process of law. That binds the federal government, and its date was 1791. The 14th Amendment says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life without due process of law, or be denied the equal protection of law. There's actually 2 clauses in there that help us, but we're just going to focus on the life clause, because the people said, we want a right to life. So the key issue is then, under originalism, and part of the miracle of Donald Trump getting elected and getting 3 justices, that by 2020, when Amy Coney Barrett became the 6th justice who is an originalist, that means they're a Supreme Court judge who believes that it's the duty of judges to follow the public meaning of the words in the Constitution according to the phrase and the meaning that the people gave it when they adopted the document. That's where we get the consent of the governed. So let's look at the Declaration of Independence. And from about 1920 to 2020, the court ignored the Declaration. It's not technically part of the Constitution. It was 15 years before. But it tells us what the meaning of the words in the Constitution is. And so let's go over this together. When I do this publicly, and if you do it in your church, you all can become ambassadors of this. Take this PowerPoint and show it wherever you want. Call us for training on it even more. But I've already had people speak about this at Ave Maria Law School from someone who was already scheduled to give a lecture there. People are starting to give it in churches. So, and this is the 250th anniversary. I'm going to read these truths. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by who? Their Creator, with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So let me just stop there. Did they believe there was a Creator? Yes, they put it in writing. They put it in a public document. They wanted everybody to know this is why we're declaring independence and creating a government. Because they went on to say that to secure these rights, what right? The right to life. Governments are instituted among men. What does that mean, Richard? They start government. Its purpose is to protect life, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And I'm just going to say this quickly, but originalism is a just powers form of government, whereas a living constitution or the liberals making up a meaning, that is illegitimate. Why is it just? The people knew what they were saying when they made the Declaration, when they put the Bill of Rights, the Fifth Amendment in the Constitution, because it wasn't strong enough. Without the Bill of Rights, it may not have even passed. And they wanted to make sure the government knew this right to life comes from God. It's inalienable, meaning you didn't give it to us. We have it from God. It's your job to protect it. And when judges follow the meaning of the words, they are just simply being fair, just judges. All right. So the next slide is an interesting thing. I just want to show you. Today, that's the public entryway of the U.S. Supreme Court. It used to have a tribute to the Greek gods. There was a statue of Minerva dictating the Constitution to young America. What a farce, historical farce.
Yeah.
But today they have the proper role of the judiciary is to interpret the meaning of the Constitution's words. All right. So this is, I'm just going to give you about 3 quick quotes. James Wilson was a very key founder. He was a signer of the Declaration, he signed the Constitution, and he was a Washington appointee to the Supreme Court. So he knew the Declaration, what it meant. He knew the right to life and the Bill of Rights and what it meant. And then he got on the court and he started writing law books and he put down what it wrote. And so the question is, did the founders believe that life began inside the womb and was therefore protected under the Constitution? Or did they think you weren't alive until you were born, like the abortion industry tries to tell you today against all science? All right, here's what he said. With consistency, beautiful and undeviating, human life from its commencement, which means beginning, to its close is protected by the common law. What was the common law? That was the law throughout all the colonies. It came from England. It was the law that whether it was written down yet or not, you could be punished because everyone knew the common law. And in many places it was written down that abortion was a crime. In the contemplation of law, life begins when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. By law, life is protected, not only from immediate destruction, but from every degree of actual violence, and in some cases, from every degree of danger.
Wow. This
is where we get child endangerment statutes, because we have to protect the young. Now, another famous founder was John Witherspoon, and he was actually a teacher. He founded and was the president of the College of New Jersey, later became Princeton University, and he taught many of the founders. And he said, in America, we've denied the power of life and death to parents. Wow, what does that mean? The power of life and death. Well, under the pagan cultures and Roman law and things like that, a parent could kill their child. They could give the woman an abortion-producing drug, which they had poisons back then. The abortion pill is just a poison. That's been around a long time. And so they had those kind of pills that would kill a baby. They could do that. Or they could take the live baby, put him on the hillside, and expose the child to the wolves and the elements until the baby died. But that was the pagan way. America said no, and we've taken away the power of life and death. Well, what is abortion, except legal abortion, except the power of life and death over your child? And that's not right. The founder said it. The last one's a little bit legalese, but James Kent is an important founder. This was 1820. So it was after the 15th Amendment, but before the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment came after the Civil War, when we fought a great civil war to end a crime against humanity, which was segregation and slavery. Anyway, James Kent said this: whenever such consideration, that means like some benefit in law, would be for his benefit, a child en ventre sa mère, which is in the mother's womb, is considered as absolutely born. In other words, if the child's still in the womb, but a legal issue comes up, to protect the child, we'll treat them as born. One clear example is property rights. If the father died while the baby was in the womb, he still got his share of the property rights, even though technically he wasn't even born when Dad died. So we would protect children. And the other way they protected them commonly was making it a crime. They used words like child murder for abortion. And that is still what it is today, child murder. They used words like they didn't use pregnant woman as much as a woman with child. When you were pregnant, you were a woman with child. So from the very beginning, and by the 14th Amendment after the Civil War, they could even see in microscopes that the sperm and the egg came together at the moment of conception to form a human being. So that's really the amazing thing. The public meaning of the words in the Constitution, twice in writing, and right now we're in a spiritual and legal revival at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is interpreting the Second Amendment according to its meaning, the right to bear arms. Yeah. And the purpose of that was for a well-regulated militia. Well, who wants a well-regulated militia today? I mean, people want the right to bear arms, but even more so, everybody wants the right to life for themselves. Not everybody wants to carry a gun or have a gun, but even though it's their right, but everybody wants a right to life for themselves. So that's where we are today.
Well, Allan, let's talk about this idea of, we used to call it original intent, but the idea that when you're interpreting the Constitution, you ought to look to what the people that passed it at the time it was adopted, what they meant by the terms. And and correct me if I said that wrong, but as an attorney, we're taught from the beginning of law school about how do you interpret a contract? How do you interpret statutes that the legislature passes? And you're told rule number one is apply the plain meaning of the words first. And if there's ambiguity, if you're not sure, then you look to external evidence to find out what is the intent of, in a contract, it's the parties to the contract. If it's the legislature, you look to the intent of the legislature at the time. How in the world did we get to a point where we apply that rule as lawyers and judges all the time throughout America in every context, except we carve out the Constitution and set it over here and say, no, it doesn't apply there. We get to invent the meaning because this is a living document.
I'd say that started in the 1920s with people like Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was a law professor. He was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And he said things like this: there is no brooding omnipresence in the sky. That's Harvardese for there is no God. Yeah. And he said the life of the law is logic. And he meant that we are the Supreme Court. We're the brightest and most intelligent people in America. We will make up the law. And later, there's even some cases where the court said, we determine what the meaning of the words in the Constitution are. Yeah. And that form of government would technically be called an oligarchy, government by a few, an elite, a committee of 9. Okay, we'll make all the rules. The final rules, the important, we'll let you have a legislature. You can make up the parking rules and which side of the road to drive on. But when it's important, we will make the decision. And that's what we have. And the Democrat Party, which argues against oligarchy and oligarchs all the time, wants an oligarchical form of government by having the judges. Their view of the law is what judges say it is. The true view of the law is what did the law mean by the people at the time it was established. Yeah. That's where the legitimacy, government of the people, by the people, for the people, as Lincoln said, comes from it. Yeah. And in this 250th year of the anniversary of the Declaration, there are 6 judges who even will look to the Declaration with its open acknowledgement of God. Now, are they establishing a theocracy? No, it's a republic, and we are a Christian nation with religious liberty. There's nothing in the Constitution that forces people to believe a certain religious fact or worship a certain way. But, for example, murder is against God's law. Mm-hmm. If the majority of people in America want to make murder a crime, we're not going to listen to the people who enjoy murder or have a good reason for it or want to discriminate on the basis of race. What if we passed a law that said and I'm quoting a terrible thing, don't anybody quote me out of context. Dred Scott said African Americans were an inferior race. What if a state decriminalized murder of African Americans? That would violate the 14th Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And the 14th Amendment will wipe out every one of these state constitutions or state laws that says you can murder a child in the womb.
Yeah.
That's where I believe we're going in time, because we have 6 judges who won't impose their own view on the American people. They'll say, what is the historical meaning of these words?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, if we're going to do this, which we must. If we look at the document and what these words meant at the time, don't we have to ask the question of, okay, what was the law at the time on abortion? So if we look at the founding era, the colonial governments and then the states after the Constitution was adopted, was abortion legal or illegal?
It was illegal at the federal level and the state level for 200 years, from the 1770s, and I quoted Wilson, from that early 1770 period to the 1970s. And what happened in 1973 was Roe v. Wade, where the court took the word liberty, which is also in there. They ignored the word life. And what they said, they said, well, yes, there's that right to life, and there's a person can't be deprived of life. But this is what they said in 1973. At this state in the development of man's knowledge, the judiciary cannot determine when life begins. Well, that was a lie. And today, absolutely, if people go to our website and they want that PowerPoint, there's some scholarly research to support it, and there's scientific evidence. This is a kind of a neat fact, I think. When you survey people, who are the experts on when life begins? Most people think biologists, right? They study life. And so a group did a survey of about 5,000 biologists around the world, not just American. And 96% of the biologists said human life begins at fertilization.
Yeah.
That's when the sperm and the egg come together and it starts growing, and it's a human life. And that's what Wilson meant, the first stirring of the womb. And they could maybe, it was before quickening because they knew the baby was there, but he really meant whenever it begins.
Mm-hmm.
And today we know it begins at conception. And the protection of the Constitution is usually applied in light of modern science. For example, it doesn't say you can't wiretap a phone. Phones didn't even exist, but you said you had a right to privacy and your private effects. So when the phone was invented, they said, okay, you can't overhear someone's phone. You can't wiretap a phone because we have the Fourth Amendment protection. The Life Amendment is in the Constitution. And we have a better way. Let me say this. We're not going to, I pray against a civil war. We're in a cold civil war right now. We need to be praying for justice and righteousness. And to my liberal friends, here's the safety valve. No woman in America has to parent a child if she doesn't want to. We're not putting the burden of 18 years of care, obligation, and expense. Every state has a safe haven law. Under the safe haven law, a woman can walk out of the hospital, leave her baby behind, or come back within usually 30, 60, or 90 days and be free of the burden of parenting. So we can say, don't kill the baby, don't hurt yourself, because abortion devastates women. And we've talked about it. I hope before it's over, we can talk about there is forgiveness for the sin of abortion for both men and women. But anyway, no woman has to parent a baby. What will happen to those children? Well, are they going to end up in foster care? No. There's 1 to 2 million women every year waiting to adopt newborn children. So the love, love, love solution is don't kill the baby, don't hurt yourself. Give us through the child through the safe haven law at no cost to you, no abortion trauma to you, and we'll give the baby to the vetted homes waiting to adopt newborn children.
Absolutely. Allan, you said a while ago in the show that we are right, of course, to focus on the unalienable right to life of the unborn child, but we should also be talking about the harm to women that happens through the crime of abortion. And you've got several ministries under the umbrella of the Justice Foundation. And I understand one of them, I can't recall which of them, but you have actually an archive of statements and affidavits and testimony of women documenting the harm they've suffered. Can you talk some more about that? How large is that collection? What are the harms that women receive when they commit the crime of abortion?
Well, we started collecting, and in the Dobbs case that reversed Roe v. Wade, we actually filed all that we had collected at that time. It's the largest collection in the world of direct sworn testimony from women about how their abortion affected them. And we presented 4,728 legally admissible affidavits or declarations under penalty of perjury in the Dobbs case that reversed Roe v. Wade. And I'll go to some of the most recent types of programs, since right now abortion pill is the most common way. Some of our earlier ones were surgical abortions, and the women talked about suicides, depression, anxiety, feeling like they were worthless, that they could never be more mothers. Recently, we did a review, and we found about 20 women who had self-sterilized themselves, either hysterectomy or tubes tied, because they felt like such unworthy mothers because they had murdered their child. And everything I'm going to tell you comes from women. It's not me saying how they should feel. But with your permission, I'd like to quote some from our most recent case, Louisiana versus the FDA. We represented 2,790 women as amicus curiae, or friend of the court parties. These are women being a party to the litigation, supporting Louisiana, who's saying the abortion pill should never be distributed in America because it's illegal under the Comstock Act, which was 1873, when the 14th Amendment compelled Congress to say no abortion-producing drug, which can be sent through the Postal Service, because Congress governs the Postal Service. We have one postal service in America, and then nor through common carrier, because Congress controlled interstate commerce. I'm getting too technical. Let's go to the women's testimony. And these are particularly gruesome. And I want to say that in the case of Gonzalez v. Carhart, which was the first major victory where the Supreme Court actually cited the pages of women's testimonies from our brief and said, some women come to regret aborting the infant life they once created and sustained. And they quoted page 22 to 24 of the brief, where the women talked about the harm and feeling like a murderer of their own child. But this is what the pills do to women. And these are paged like on 8 to about a few of our briefs. Abby Johnson is the first one I'm going to quote. We represent her. She was the author of the book Unthinkable.
Yeah.
And then from it's a movie called Unplanned. She said, and this is going to be gruesome. If you have children, you might be a little bit cautious here. I was passing clots the size of lemons. I scooped my baby up. I wasn't sure what to do. No one had prepared me for that. It felt wrong, but I dropped my child in the toilet, closed my eyes, and flushed. Catherine says, I thought I was going to die. I was all alone and bleeding, intense cramping, large pieces of bloody tissue. The difference between surgical abortion, which many women had up until the pill became popular, a doctor did the procedure. So you could feel like it was a medical act. But when you take the pill, you become the abortionist directly. That's a deep trauma. And then number 2, the doctor took care of the human remains. Nowhere else do we tell the person, here's the human remains of your child. And the women are just traumatized deeply. Here's Kelly Lester saying, the bleeding and pain started almost immediately. You know what their slogan is? It's as safe as Tylenol. How many times has Tylenol made a woman bleed intensely, thinking she's going to die, causing and calling for an ambulance? The pain lasted 2 days. It felt like I was in full-born labor. I was alone in one of my bathrooms in my apartment. I was doing drugs just to try to numb the pain. And in the end, I ultimately broke my lease and moved out because I couldn't stand to be in the apartment any longer and experience the trauma again. It would be triggered.
Guilt, yeah.
PTSD does to people. Most people have never killed anyone.
Yeah.
But abortion pills kill a human being, and the woman sees it. I'll quote, I was told a pill was easier and safer. It's not. Everything the doctor told me was a lie. Patricia said, I believed I was dying. I was in physical pain. I was forced to flush my aborted baby down the toilet. Several of them women mentioned seeing that baby because they have to do something with the baby. It's on the toilet, it's on the floor, it's in their hands, or it's on the couch or the bed where they're bleeding at home. And they want to often do something special with the baby. This is one that says, my 9-week-old child sits in my freezer.
Oh, goodness.
I'm trying to find strength to bury her. Richard, the first woman that ever called me, I can remember it now. She was crying and sobbing, and we're a legal organization. She said, they lied to me. They lied to me. They told me this wasn't a baby. And I can see the hands. I can see the feet. This is a baby. Can I bury my baby in the backyard? That was her legal question to me. And we don't let human remains be buried in the backyard. But now we're flushing down the toilet.
Yeah, we don't let them be buried in the backyard, but we flush them into our drinking water. And
you got it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I fainted from the amount of blood I lost. Some of these from helplines. Every day I burst into bouts of tears because it was my baby. This lady says, I'm haunted by its eyes.
Allan, the abortion industry is saying all over the place that the abortion pill is safe. Only less than 1 in 1,000 women have any problems, and they're usually minor, or something along those lines. I might be wrong. How is it that they're allowed to lie like that and are getting away with it? Why can't we get the truth out about what the pill is doing to women and the graphic nature of what it does?
Well, statistics can be manipulated in lots of ways. I always feel it's the testimony of each woman that is the most important way. And how do we overcome Satan? The Bible says by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and that we love not our lives unto death. And it was the testimony of women in the Gonzalez case, Gonzalez v. Carhart, where they said it's an infant life for the first time ever in Supreme Court history. Before the women's testimonies, they said it's a fetus, an embryo, or a potential life. But based on the women's testimony, they called it an infant life. And let me say this too, I noticed before we close or anything, abortion is not the unforgivable sin. Women may feel like a murderer. Many women would say, well, I know God's forgiven me, but I can't forgive him myself. Operation Outcry on our website for the Justice Foundation is the written testimonies of women who've been hurt by abortion. If you've been hurt by abortion, first, I want to say Jesus Christ can heal you and forgive you. On our website are abortion recovery programs, Christ-centered healing all over the nation. So we first want you to get healed. But as part of the healing, your truth can be known to the Supreme Court to overcome the lie of the abortion industry. Women all the time say, they lied to me. They told me it wasn't a baby. But I see it in the toilet.
So with 3.5 minutes left, Allan, real quick, what is this Gonzalez case? What court was it in, and what's the legal importance of it?
It was in the U.S. Supreme Court. It was in 2007. We got called in 2000 to represent Norma and Sandra. Along the way, the Supreme Court denied Sandra and Motion's cert petitions to reverse. As you know, as a lawyer, that does not mean they ruled against them. A denial of cert has no precedential value. You can continue to make the arguments. And in 2000, think about this, they had just struck down 38 state laws banning partial birth abortion. And then George Bush miraculously got elected with the hanging chads, and he eventually got Harriet Miers withdrawn because the pro-life movement said no more stealth candidates. They've got to be strong. He got Alito on the court, and it ended up being Alito who wrote the opinion to reverse it. So Gonzalez v. Carhart, that is federal law. Now they haven't, and it's still good law even after Dobbs. So when they decide that the right to life protects life, they've already ruled in a prior case that the baby is alive. It's a, quote, infant life at the moment of the abortion.
Wow. So we have the United States Supreme Court saying that the baby in the womb is an infant life. We have the U.S. Constitution saying that neither the federal nor the state governments can deprive a person of life without due process of law. In 20 seconds, Allan, how long is it going to be before abortion is banned throughout the land?
Well, the thing we're still lacking is millions of people praying. I told people I believe Roe is going to be overturned. I have a promise from God, and millions are praying. In the PowerPoint, there are 3 prayer points. Pray that the Supreme Court will find and recognize and apply. It takes moral courage. It takes wisdom. It takes conviction. And millions of people praying. So if you want the prayer points, they're in the PowerPoint. I believe with all my heart that the covenant with death will be annulled, and that abortion, what's been done is there's no right to abortion. Now the court has to find the right to life in the Constitution. They were not asked to do so in the Dobbs case. They did all that they were required to do to let abortion be banned. Now about half the states ban it, about half the states protect it. In a cold civil war, the nation is divided. America's in the valley of decision. This year, 2026, is prayer time. And I believe within 1 to 3 years, at the most, we're going to find the right to life and protect all human life and give women a better alternative through safe haven or traditional adoption, where the woman can even pick the parents.
So powerful, so eloquent. Ladies and gentlemen, lawyer Allan Parker, former counsel for Norma McCorvey, and the leader of the Justice Foundation. Please, everybody, go to the Justice Foundation's website today and get a copy of that PowerPoint. Share it with your pastor, your friends, your neighbors, and maybe even have a small group Bible study around it. I promise you're able to do so. Also, thank you everybody for watching. Be sure to go to our website, truthandliberty.net. If you aren't a subscriber to Truth and Liberty, share your email with us and you'll get a free copy of my booklet, The Calling to Manhood. Thanks for watching today. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time on Truth and Liberty.